Welcome to an introduction to economics brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. For more information about Parkbench Tutors, please visit parkbenchtutors.com. This is the first of two podcasts that will introduce ideas on trade policies. We shall be looking primarily at barriers to free trade. In earlier podcasts, we saw that free trade between two countries can potentially maximize the welfare for both of the countries involved. There were mutual benefits that were available. The conclusion was reached assuming there were mobile factors of production and no external factors. The question we are going to ask here is whether forms of protectionism could also increase the welfare of a country. What is protectionism? There are many forms of protectionism, but all are designed to prevent an inflow of goods to the country. In other words, to limit or even prevent imports of certain goods. A tariff is the addition of a tax to an imported good, making it more expensive than the same good produced in the home country. A quota is the limiting of the amount of a good that can be imported into a country during any one period. The quota may be a simple quantity limit, but it could also be expressed in terms of value or of market share. An exchange control system is more rigorous and demands that residents obtain bank permission to obtain foreign currency for the purchase of certain goods. All of these methods will lead to increased costs for administration, including security to prevent excessive smuggling of goods into the country. Subsidies given to home producers may reduce prices and make their goods more competitive against imported goods. Subsidies might also be used to promote exports. Deposits can be requested for imported goods and additional regulations imposed. In recent years there have been a number of food restrictions, such as those relating to movement of beef, which were claimed to relate to health and safety. These might also be regarded as a form of protectionism. How does imposing a tariff really affect trade? The position for a good is shown in the chart. DD representing the domestic demand curve, and SD the supply curve for the domestic good. The line SW represents the supply available as imported goods. Prior to imposing a tariff, the price is W1. The total goods supplied for consumption is 0Q4, of which 0Q1 is supplied by home production and 0Q4 minus 0Q1 supplied by imports. A tariff is now imposed, which raises the price to P1. The supply of goods available as imported goods remains the same, but at a higher price. However, the total demand has fallen to 0Q3. The quantity of goods supplied by home producers is 0Q2, a rise of 0Q2 minus 0Q1. The amount supplied by imports has fallen by the same quantity, 0Q4 minus 0Q3. The consumer surplus is the monetary indicator we use for the gap between the total utility that society derives from a good and the good's actual market value. For each unit, it is the difference between the price paid and the price the consumer would have been prepared to pay. Prior to the imposition of a tariff, this is given by the area of the triangle ABW1. Following the imposition of the tariff, the consumer surplus has been reduced. The area is now given by the triangle ACP1. Remember that the consumer surplus is that area between the price paid, the line P1, and the demand curve, DD. So, what has happened to the consumer surplus that has been lost? Part of that consumer surplus has been lost to the home producers. This is represented by the area P1 RQW1 and represents a monetary gain for them. Part of the loss has now gone to the government in the form of a tariff. This is represented by the area RSTC and represents a monetary gain to the government. This leaves two areas, the small triangles, that are referred to as deadweight loss or resource misallocation. Resource misallocation is regarded as a cost on society. The triangle on the right, CTB, represents a consumption loss, since this quantity is no longer being consumed. This area, Q1, Q2, RQ, is the cost of producing the additional good domestically. The cost of producing this good prior to a tariff being imposed is given by Q1, Q2, SQ. Therefore, the triangle QSR represents an extra cost of producing the good after the tariff has been imposed. Given that there is an additional cost, what are the arguments in favour of the tariff? One argument that is used is that there is a need to protect strategic industries. These are industries that are considered to be important and necessary to the nation for the defence of the country or in times of crisis. They have included agriculture, armaments, aerospace, shipbuilding and oil refining. In fact, the aerospace and shipbuilding industries have been largely lost due to increasing costs of trying to produce the good in the United Kingdom. If the purchase of a good incurs an additional cost, then this can be a disadvantage to an industry. Free trade helps UK industries to purchase aircraft from overseas manufacturers. If firms were forced to purchase a product from the UK, they may be placed at a disadvantage in trying to carry out their business. Imposing a tariff may force the producer to reduce the price of their good. However, where there is effectively a single supplier, then this will have little effect. Helping a new industry become established is seen as important in developing countries. But it is also argued that protection should be only for a limited time, whilst the workforce is trained. If capital is not forthcoming after that period, it may be that the industry is not considered to be viable in the long term. Dumping is the practice of supplying a good to another country at a price below that of the country of origin. The domestic market may even be used to subsidize the dumping of the good. Sometimes the dumping is seen as a way of driving out competition, and many are sympathetic to action against dumping where this is the case. However, can a country really prevent persistent dumping if domestic costs are far too high? Electronic goods, clothing and agricultural goods are all imported in quantity because of the high prices of comparable domestic goods. It is not easy at times to determine whether some of these imports represent dumping. How important a part do large corporations play in importing goods at low cost? There will often be an outcry against the cost of importing certain goods from producers and trade unions who are seeking protection. As a member of the European Union, such protection cannot be given where the competitor is another EEC member. It is argued that wage rates in other countries are below those of the UK, making labour cheaper. This is correct, but it is also a reason for trading. Given that some industries undergo structural change, there may be a strong argument for a level of protectionism while restructuring takes place, certainly while retraining takes place. The voices for protectionist policies were very loud during the 1970s, when a balance of payments deficit led to deflationary policies. These in turn led to high unemployment. The claim was that import controls could have maintained full employment. However, import controls could also have led to trade wars and loss of exports. so unemployment was still a likely outcome. If import controls are used, there are some potentially adverse outcomes. The countries affected by their loss of exports will have lower national incomes and may be unable to afford imports from the United Kingdom. The goods exported to the United Kingdom may go to other countries and displace the United Kingdom exports to that country. Imports may be reduced, but to replace them, so the goods are domestically produced, may involve importing raw materials. Finally, any increased income in the United Kingdom may be spent on other imports, or on goods that were previously exported. This ends our first podcast on trade policy, brought to you by Parkbench Tutors and narrated by David Hopcroft. Thank you for watching and for listening. We wish you success in your studies. For further information on Parkbench Tutors, please visit prtectionism.com.